On the 3rd of December 1994, the PlayStation was released to the Japanese public. It sold 100,000 units on its first day. It started from a joint venture between Nintendo and Sony in 1986. Nintendo had a peripheral called the Family Computer Disk System, also known as the Famicom Disk System or FDS. This system allowed a kind of floppy disk to be played instead of the more expensive cartridges on the Famicom. The Famicom is Nintendo's family computer, marketed to the rest of the world as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, only in a redesigned case. With the successor to the NES in the works, the Super Famicom, or SNES, Nintendo wanted to update the FDS as well. They contacted Sony to produce a CD-ROM add-on. This add-on was going to be known by the title of SNES CD, or PlayStation. In 1988, a contract was signed and work between the two companies started. Sony had also planned to make their own SNES-compatible console under the Sony brand. The intention was for it to be a multi-format console playing SNES cartridges and the new format which was to be used in the SNES CD. This console was originally known as the Superdisc. A few years of development had occurred when the then president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, reread the contract between Nintendo and Sony. He was horrified to read the agreement effectively gave full control to Sony for any titles written on the SNES CD system. This was found to be unacceptable to Yamauchi, so he secretly cancelled the project. This was all before the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, where the Nintendo-Sony partnership was supposed to be announced. Instead, Nintendo announced a partnership with Philips, with all previous work with Sony being scrapped. In the aftermath of the collapse of the partnership, Sony began talks with Sega and had conducted some preliminary development work. These talks were short-lived after being vetoed by Sega's board of directors. After shelving the research and development of the console, Sony eventually restarted their efforts and completed a console based on the development work conducted with Nintendo and Sega. This was called the PlayStation. This was noted by Nintendo, who filed an injunction at a US court over the use of the name PlayStation, as they owned the name, with the intention of stopping the console's release. The presiding judge denied the injunction, and the PlayStation console was launched in October 1991. Not many of these machines were made, with it theorised the number is as few as 200. Over the next few years, up to the end of 1992, some of the tensions with Nintendo were ironed out, and the PlayStation could still retain its SNES-compatible port, with Nintendo retaining most of the profits from the games, and the SNES would retain its bit of Sony-designed hardware and advanced audio processing chip. Sony decided in 1993 to rework the PlayStation into a next-generation console. As a part of this process, the SNES port was dropped, and the name changed to PlayStation, without the space. This was to end Nintendo's involvement with the project. It was at this point all the prior work conducted with Nintendo was effectively removed from the new hardware. It was during this period where the PSX title originates, after Sony Computer Entertainment America, SCIA, had poor market feedback from the name PlayStation. PSX was eventually dropped before launch. 1993 rolled into 1994, and the launch day approached. The hype surrounding the console began to spread quickly, and on the 3rd of December it was released in Japan with stunning success. Long lines at the stores and generally favourable reviews from critics encouraged it to sell 2 million units in the first 6 months on the market. The US and Europe releases occurred in 1995 on the 9th of September and the 29th of September respectively, though there was already a flourishing grey market exporting the PlayStation from Japan, and the rest, as they say, is history.